Hey, it's John at Tinderbox Arts again, and in this little project, we're going to be working on some timbales that I have had forever, like decades and decades. I bought them used in the 80s. I don't even know what brand they are, but I thought, you know what, rather than just have them sit around and gather dust, let me see what I can do with them. But what I've decided to do was to paint them, and I'm going to show you how we're going to do that. I've got some replacement lugs because these are all missing and I don't have enough. I may look at the shells themselves to see if they need any repairs. These are very thin shells. There is a seam. Let me find that. There's a seam right here. The other thing I've decided to do was to get, I did spend $10 on these. These are mounts for a more modern mount. The original one had, an oddball proprietary thing right here, which does not help me. Now, just to give you a preview of what's going to be going on here, when you have chrome over steel like this is, chrome does not take paint very well. So in order to make this paint work, we have to scratch up this chrome quite a bit, and we're going to use some special primers and some paint on top of that. So if you've done any automotive work, you're going to be familiar with some of this. First, we'll get rid of all this hardware here and just see what the shell looks like, how bad it is, and how much cleaning up I have to do. That's going away forever. Some of these holes here, I may look at patching. I'm not sure if I can or not. We're going to find out. Now, the new lugs that I bought, I found would fit in these holes, which were somewhat unusual. They're 1 3/8 centers, and there weren't many choices. So I found these lugs. They're new old stock. They'll be fine. Okay, with the hardware off, you can see these shells are in pretty rough shape. I mean, there's actual rust inside here. What I figured out is these holes right here for the lugs are spaced correctly, but they're not quite big enough, so I will need to drill those out a slightly larger size. So these holes I'm not going to use anymore. I'm going to try to see if I can fill those. And there's two methods you might try to do that with. One is welding. Brazing, though, is another option. Brazing uses rods that melt under a certain temperature. It's still a pretty high temperature, and I may run the risk of ruining these shells. I could bend them with the heat. The seams could, be an issue. So it's something I'll look at and give it a shot, but I'm not sure if it's going to work or not. All right, I have a piece of scrap steel here. I figured I'd just try this brazing on the scrap to see if it is even a possibility, and it's a complete fail. I mean, it's a complete fantasy that this is going to work. I can get the brazing material on here, but you have to heat this metal so hot that it's going to distort the drum shell, and there's just no way that's going to be a practical solution. So that's a fail. Well, you can do it. The brazing over here, it was a complete fail, and I had to get it way too hot. This, you do blow through. What I did was put my MIG welder on its lowest setting, but a fairly fast feed rate. And, it's not the prettiest thing, but you can, build up a little bit of a puddle there just by clicking it on and off, and fill that hole. You can see I ended up on my lowest heat setting and a fairly high rate of feed. So what the heck, I'm going to give it a shot. Let's just see what happens. All right, here's the area that I welded right here. I mean, there's a little nub there I have to grind down, but you know what? It did actually work, and it didn't really seem to warp the shell. So if I'm careful, I think I might be able to fill some of these holes. Well, it's far from perfect, but right there is where the hole was. And once you sand it down a little bit, I got to do a little more sanding. It's actually not too bad. Keep in mind, I haven't done any sanding on the rest of the chrome yet, and I haven't painted it yet. So I guess it was worth it. All right, that's the first pass with the sanding. This is the outside here, and I have some more to do. I was using 80 grit, so I really just want to scratch this up so that it's not shiny anymore. I have some more to do here, so just keep going at this until I'm satisfied that there's not any shiny part that's going to have trouble as far as paint sticking. Okay, that's up to 120 grit now. And that's pretty much where I need to be. I don't need to go crazy here. Now, if this were some drum I was trying to get perfect, I might go a little further, but I'm really not. I mean, there's flaws in this drum I'm never going to fix, so this is good enough. But before I get to the priming stage, which is next, I want to clean this off really well. I'll use a degreaser, and I'll use acetone or alcohol, either one, just to get all the debris off of here, the sanding debris off of here, and have it nice and clean. All right, let's talk about the paint we're going to be using. It's all out of a rattle can. The first thing we need is a self-etching primer, which will chemically bond to the metal. And without this, we wouldn't have much chance of making paint stick to the chrome, even though we did scratch it up. So self-etching primer first. I also have a regular primer, which is really here mostly because of the color. It's a little bit darker, and it more closely matches my final finish. And the final finish is this. It's a matte hammered look, and this paint, if you look at the cap, hopefully you can see that it kind of has imperfections in it, kind of pitted look, and that's done on purpose. And it's also a matte finish, so it's not super shiny, and I think the combination will help hide some of the flaws and imperfections that remain in the shells, and I think it'll be an interesting look as well. The lugs and the rim will still remain chrome. Okay, with 3 coats of paint done, you can see what it's going to look like. It's dry, but I'm not going to call it cured yet. I'm going to wait a little bit before I start putting hardware on this. I just want the paint time to set up and harden before I start, messing around with hardware, and I might scratch it up. But I'm very pleased with the look of it. I mean, it's got, it says matte on the can, but it's really more of a satin finish. And I'll show you a close up here, but it is some texture to it, but it's not overwhelming at all. I think it looks actually pretty cool, kind of an industrial look. Here's a close up of the texture, and it's nice. I like it. All right, with the paint fully cured, I can start putting the hardware on. Now, one thing we got to think about here, when I put these lugs on, they are long enough in this area so that they will fit in a wooden shell, but we have metal shells here, so they actually stick proud of the surface of the shell. So we have to do something about that, put some kind of spacer there, a washer there or something. Now there are a number of different ways you can handle this. What I did was I got some of these, which are actually washers meant for a bugle head, to recess a bugle head. They call it countersunk washers, but I'm not using that. I'm using, where is it? I'm using these, which came with the lugs. So even though it's not the correct use of it, it's going to work fine as a spacer, and that's all I really care about. All right, I got the heads on. I had to use the old ones. I just didn't have new ones available to me right now, and these old heads are pretty bad actually, but we'll get some sound out of it. And they look pretty good. I'm actually pretty pleased with the way they came out. I definitely like it better than the chrome look.